Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the interview room. So great to see everyone here this evening from Wisconsin to New Zealand. We really appreciate each and every one of you on this blessed Sunday evening. Special prayers with Teresa tonight. One of our mods, her husband, is in need of your prayers, who's going through some very serious health issues. Please keep him in your prayers this evening. We've got so much to cover. We're really excited to see each and every one of you. Let me adjust my camera.
Hey everybody, welcome to our Sunday Night Live. So great to see everybody. Thank you for being here, and I hope you guys have been having a really good weekend.
Most definitely. That fixes the camera issue. Got that resolved. What do we have in the house tonight? Let's see here. We have our mods, Miss Sophia. We have Maui Girl, Teresa M, and Mimi J2, and Laura Walder. Thank you. And we've got Miss Martino's in the house. Thank you. It's great seeing you. Alexandra, Lori's in the house. And of course, all of these individuals that Laura is pointing out. Thank you for being here in New Zealand. Man, oh man. We are so grateful. Cincinnati. My goodness. Spokane. And thank you, Deborah. Yes, prayers for Teresa's husband, Jeff. We have to give him positive vibes. He's going through some major health issues. And we just want to make sure that the Lord hears our prayers collectively as a group. Australia's in the house. Thank you. All of you for being here this evening. Karen, we've got a lot to cover, and we have a birthday coming up. Do you remember whose birthday it is tomorrow?
Is it tomorrow or is it Tuesday?
It's the 10th of November. Who knows whose birthday it is?
And it would be tomorrow.
Yeah.
Let's see if anybody in chat. I don't know if it's more of a who or of a what. It's not really a who. It's an entity.
That is true. Well, happy birthday. Happy birthday to all of our friends in the United States Marine Corps. We are so grateful for your service, and we appreciate everything you each give this country. All right, Jarhead. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being amazing. And I have to tell you, Karen and I are a little biased because for a whole bunch of reasons, but more importantly, hang on, let me shut that screen off. Figure that one
And
out.
Chris, speak a little closer to your mic when you get a chance because it's a little garbled.
Can you hear me now?
Much better. Thank you.
Okay. And to my parents, this is my mother and father, both buried in Arlington National Cemetery, section 34, 3574. You can go say hi to my parents if you're in DC. My father fought in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. And so Semper Fi, Mom and Dad, and happy birthday up in heaven. All right, we've got our good stuff out of the way. What do you think, Karen? Where are we headed tonight?
So tonight is part 2 of our deep dive into the Idaho murders, the new release of the huge amount of documents, those 2,356 pages of documents. If you caught our Friday Night Live just a couple nights ago, you know that this is like a part 2, a continuation of that with a few extra things sprinkled in as well. So we are going to be talking about a lot what these documents have revealed. We're going to be deep diving into what the information shows about the prosecutor, Latah County Prosecutor Bill Thompson, what was going on behind the scenes in the investigation with the investigators, the police, Bill Thompson. So we're going to take a look at all that, what he did do, what he didn't do. And we're going to be sharing everything with you guys, everything that we have found out, that we've uncovered, our reading of the documents. We're sharing it all with you guys.
Yep. And we left off the other night with some ideas about, we had reached out to the governor's office and we started questioning, as we talked about recently, where did this $1 million go that was sent down to, the university / ISP? Where did it go? And what did we find? What did you find out, Karen?
Well, first, let's just back up a tiny bit and just tell people that even though these documents are coming out, we think they're being dripped out very slowly. In the meantime, we haven't stopped sending in FOIA requests, Freedom of Information Act. That's what FOIA is. And we've been sending them in literally since the sentencing. And we haven't gotten very far. It feels like we've gotten the door slammed on us requesting these documents almost at every turn, not completely, but mostly. And so what Chris is talking about, so we're kind of doing a blanket approach. So we're not just waiting for documents to drop. We're going back and we're kind of looking at different areas of the investigation, different areas of the case that we've covered that you guys are all familiar with. And one area that we had been sending in Public Records Act requests, which I use that term pretty interchangeably with FOIA, Freedom of Information Act. It's the same thing. And so we went back to, do you guys remember when the Idaho student murders went down on November 13th, 2022? Very, very shortly thereafter, the Idaho governor, Brad Little, pledged $1 million to give $1 million for the investigation. And the person who said, hey, the governor's given us $1 million was the University of Idaho president, Scott Green. And so we were following up. And so what I did was I reached out to Idaho Governor, Brad Little's office, and I did a formal Public Records Act request and the email explaining, hey, look, we're just following up. We want to know where the $1 million went, what it was spent on, etc. So I did that at that was like at the end of October. And I got back a response saying that, well, they gave us one number. Okay. They said, well, about $430,000 of the $1 million had been spent.
Do you want me to
And
put
I
that
said,
email up, Karen?
no, not yet. Let me just kind of finish and then we'll put it up because I want to read it.
Okay.
And I said, okay, well, that's great. Thanks for telling me that. Let's go through. Tell me where that $430,000 was spent. We need more evidence, you know? So they wrote back saying, well, we'll have to check with Idaho State Police because Idaho State Police got it. And that's where I said also, well, it's my understanding that the University of Idaho got that money. And so my email correspondence with them kind of dropped off. Okay. So last Sunday, we had Steve and Christy Gonzalez on our program, if you remember. And by the way, there'll be a link below to that video. So when we're done, if you haven't seen it or want to see it again, we urge you to go look at that. So we had them on. They are Kaylee's parents. Kaylee Gonzalez, of course, is one of the 4 University of Idaho students who was killed by Bryan Kohberger at 1122 King Road, November 13th, 2022. So, and by the way, obviously that 4-year anniversary is coming up this week. Or excuse me, 3 years. It's 3 years, 3-year anniversary. Okay. So we had them on the program. The very next day, you guys may find this interesting. I got an email from Idaho Governor Brad Little's office from his communications director, and she sent me a really interesting email. And that's what we're going to start the show with tonight. We're going to put it on the screen. I'm going to read it and talk about it. We thought it was interesting. And like I said earlier, everything we find and are discovering, we're sharing with you. We feel all of this needs to be made public. We need to have 100% transparency now that the case is over. You know, P.S. Is it really over? I mean, we just saw another hearing this last week. I was telling you, this is the case that doesn't end, the case that won't end. And the people that are hurting the most are the victims' families. And that's the part that is so disturbing and so just infuriating. So anyway, Chris, let's put up this email.
All right.
That we got. Okay, so I'm going to read it if it's too small for you guys. So this is from a woman named Emily Callahan, and maybe she's watching tonight. If she is, hi, Emily. So Emily Callahan is the communications director for Idaho Governor Brad Little. She says, hello, Karen. I listened to a portion of your interview with the Gonzalez family pertaining to the use of governor's emergency funds. The information you shared about the governor's emergency funds was inaccurate. Okay, so she's saying that what we said on our show last Sunday was wrong or inaccurate. She said the money expended from the governor's emergency fund was used to support the investigation, not the University of Idaho. Expenses were connected to the work of the investigation and were determined by Idaho State Police in coordination with local law enforcement and other investigation partners. The primary use of the funds was for overtime pay directly related to the investigation and increased police presence in Moscow, equipment for the investigation, lodging and fuel for travel and patrol. Up to $1 million was authorized, but law enforcement only ended up using $430,222. The rest of it remains in the governor's emergency fund for other purposes. Okay, so I had said that $1 million pledged by the governor was going towards University of Idaho. Where did I get that information? Okay, so according to the governor, we got it wrong. So, Chris, next slide. Let's look at where I would have gotten this information. Okay. So this is University of Idaho President Scott Green's book that he wrote, and it came out, I don't know, maybe a year after the murders?
Yep.
He's got
About
a
that time.
chapter, right? So this is from his chapter that he wrote about the murders. I believe he may have been the first author to write about the Idaho murders, but this is the president of the university. Okay. So here's where I got that money was earmarked for University of Idaho. Okay, I'm going to lean in and read it. Okay. So in his book, Scott Green says,
Page 356.
yes, thank you. Page 356. Meanwhile, Moscow PD brought in the FBI to collaborate on the investigation and released that they knew the murderer had a bladed weapon to commit the crimes. Reporters continued to pour into town. So if you're just joining us, I am reading this long paragraph from Scott Green's book that talks about the $1 million that the governor's office is basically accusing us of getting the information wrong. And here's why I don't think we got it wrong. We're reading Scott Green's book in his own words. So he says, Idaho Governor Brad Little offered assistance to the university, and Idaho State Police came into Moscow from all over the state in a show of force. Okay, so right there, he's saying, Scott Green is saying, the governor offered assistance to the university. Okay, next paragraph. Quote.
Now, but, hon, why would that be
Yeah.
important? Why would that be important for the governor of Idaho to support a state-funded university?
Well, okay, so let's go back to November 13th. If you guys remember, the four students, Kaylee, Xana, Maddie, and Ethan, were killed in their home off campus, right? There was a murderer loose. There was a lot of fear. There was a lot of panic. Remember, this was like the week before Thanksgiving break. Tons of kids went home and stayed home. And the university, in my opinion, and it's not a stretch to say this, kind of went into panic mode about their students. Were they coming home? And let's be honest, you guys. University of Idaho is not alone. College is big business, millions and billions of dollars. Okay. So yeah, they're running a business. They were worried if their student body was shrinking, meaning were students coming back? Were people going to drop out? What was going on? So that money to the University of Idaho would have been kind of a cushion or whatnot, kind of a, while all this was getting sorted out, the fact if they were getting $1 million from the state, it would have cushioned the blow, if you will. Okay. Laura, you're so funny.
It's your
so
left,
cute.
Jen.
Left him. Okay.
Now you guys know why I was always afraid of her. She is like a bulldog. Go ahead, hon.
Okay. So again, page 356 in Scott Green's book, he says, quote, the governor was so supportive, immediately pledging $1 million to accommodate our response to the crime. It says it right there. Okay. I didn't make it up. It's right here. Okay. And giving the green light to ISP to provide help. So that's a little, it's not super clear who's getting it, but it's certainly clear University of Idaho, according to their president, just wrote here, hey, we're getting some of this. Idaho State Police will get some of this. That's how I'm reading it.
Asked her to break it out, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Subsequent emails. Go ahead.
Exactly. I don't know if I need to read the rest, but
well, they
anyway,
talk about ISP officers coming in and going sledding with the kids and support, behind the scenes. There was a whole bunch of officers that came down there. They put them up, in dorms, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It was more of a, an emotional, let's hug everybody and golly, let's, sled with the kids. And he even mentions in here, there's some, crazy video that went, nuts, showing the cops and all the college students, having snowball fights and all this other stuff, which, is absolutely ludicrous speed, from Spaceballs. You know, and they get $1 million allegedly to ISP to come in and throw snowballs with the college students. It's just, this is ridiculous. But go ahead, finish your thought.
Yeah, so the governor's office is saying we, the interview room here on YouTube, got it wrong. They said we were inaccurate. So I sent back a note to Emily. I included a screenshot of this page that you're looking at in the book. And I said, I'm going to read my email back to her regarding this. I said, Emily, upon further review of your email stating that our information was inaccurately reported, I went back to University of Idaho President Scott Green's book. It's called University President's Crisis Handbook. See attached photo on page 356. And he clearly states, quote, the governor was so supportive, immediately pledging $1 million to accommodate our response to the crime. Governor Little also authorized additional ISP personnel. And I said, well, that's interesting because the FBI was already engaged with unlimited resources working with Moscow PD, according to Scott Green's book. And then and then I quote the book again. Idaho Governor Brad Little offered assistance to the university, and ISP came into Moscow from all over the state in a show of force, Scott Green said in his book. To make it clearer from the governor's office, please provide an itemized breakdown of the $430,222 spent, not just telling me this in an email. I assume you would want the Idaho taxpayers to know this information. Once we receive the documents, we will be happy to review them and then make any necessary corrections. And thank you for watching our show. Sincerely, Karen. So that was my response back to the email that said we got it wrong. And okay, so why are we, if it seems like we're nitpicking or why, which I don't think we are trying to hold the government accountable for their actions. I thought it was really interesting. And I said to Chris, when we got that email Monday, I said, why is the governor's office monitoring what Steve and Christy Gonzalez are saying in public on podcasts?
I thought that was really interesting that the governor's office weighed in on an email that said, hey, we just want to clarify Governor Little actually gave $1 million, but he didn't give it to the university. He gave it to ISP, and they've only spent whatever it is, $400 and something thousand. And Karen responded, well, that's fine. Then it's the people's money. Please show the people the receipts. And if we've made a mistake, we certainly will fix it. And to Dream Crazy, no, the question here is, of course not. We're not saying that Bryan Kohberger is innocent. I mean, the guy confessed to the crime. But what we are saying is stuff like this is very problematic. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit.
Well, and it also, and again, I say this because even though we're getting these document dumps, and there is some information included in there, the larger thing going on behind the scenes is that a lot of people in the media, a lot of YouTube creators, people on social media are still requesting public for the agencies to make this public. We're still filing Public Records Act requests. And we're getting, I would say, for the most part, not completely, but we are getting stonewalled and whatever. But we go back to the plea deal. We go back to the sentencing. We were told by Bill Thompson that they were going to make public, right? There was no trial in this case. They did a very hurried plea deal, which we still don't understand why there was such a rush, and that they were going to be releasing documents. Well, they've done some, but as we've said, there's a boatload more that we haven't seen, a lot more. And, agencies have to be responsible for the taxpayers that pay them. This is just basic government civics 101. There's nothing new here. And there seems to be, there's a reluctance for these agencies to release this information. And we talk about it here all the time on the channel, right? You guys ask why are they acting secret? Why should any of this stuff be secret? It shouldn't. It should all be opened up, made public. And, my job as a journalist for 35 years is to hold people accountable, hold our government officials accountable. If journalists don't ask tough questions and send back emails and press these people for the information, then nobody will. Then, the public is powerless and the media is really their representative. And so we're going to continue on this. Go ahead.
No, hon, I think tell them also about you've also requested a while ago the consulting fees. Who was consulted during this investigation and how much were they paid? Have you gotten that information yet?
No. And that was from the University of Idaho. The University of Idaho paid huge sums of money. I'll have to go back, but it was like well north of $400,000 to two different consulting companies. And we have some hard, tough questions to ask. Scott Green was involved in a firm before he was hired at University of Idaho. It was an East Coast firm. We want to know, was his firm given those contracts? I don't know. These are questions. Okay. The University of Idaho is far less forthcoming than even the other agencies that investigated the student murders. And so we're going to keep staying on it. So just to kind of put a final note on here, I've been going back and forth with Emily Callahan in Idaho Governor Little's office. And she tells me that she's waiting to hear from ISP because I've said, break down that $430,000. She said, well, I have to wait to hear from ISP to get that figure. And I was telling Chris, here's the analogy. It's kind of like, let's just use this, a father giving a college student money. Okay. And instead of asking the father, asking the father, hey, how much money did you give your college student? You're waiting for the college student to give an accounting of how much he got from dad. Doesn't make any sense.
That's such a good analogy. And so like we just want to make sure that, all of us in the public, are looked at as if we hadn't all fallen off a turnip truck. And if there is impropriety somewhere of funds being moved from one account to another, because, this opportunity presented itself, I am curious. It goes back to why, for me anyway, the house, why that was torn down so fast, so quickly. It was literally in motion within 3 weeks after the homicides and even before a suspect was identified. That's all in the reports. We have some emails. We've shown that. And you guys can go back and look through our play set where we start bringing up, hey, wait a minute. Who's this Scott Green guy? i.e., how's he connected to the investigation? Oh, wait, he's the university president. Okay, well, what does he have to do with this investigation? Was my question. Okay, and the list just kept on going, right? And the list just kept on going, and I don't know if they did spend over 4 million. If they did, the majority of that's in salaries. The majority of it's not case investigation. That is, probably going to be, somewhere in that area, the $4 million. Yeah, the same market value for the homes in Moscow. So all we've done, and all Karen has done, quite frankly, because this has been her lane, and I've learned a long time ago to stay out of it, unless I want to get run over, is when she's doing her thing, all she has asked them as a professional journalist, hey, where's the money? Where'd you get it? What was it spent on? And please show the receipts on those expenditures. That's it. It's not unreasonable. Okay. And I knew a long time ago, because she used to cover government too before, she covered crime. And I know she got some folks into big trouble in a lot of the newspapers that she worked at when she used to go attend, all those council meetings and sit with city managers, et cetera. Tell them about Lawnmower Man real fast. Just a quick, real fast about Lawnmower Man.
So he was in the city of Oceanside. I got to remember, was he the city manager?
Yep.
So, gosh, okay, it's been a while. Now we're going back a number of years, a few decades. One of the things again that you guys can kind of tell is um taxpayers have a right to know, the public has a right to know. And so in cover whatever I'm covering, and it used to be government, I would go back and I would look. I mean, I would hear from a lot of different people, things going on, things, whatever, and I would look into them. That's the job of a journalist. And if once I dug in, I would really dig in, and the numbers don't lie. So I was always in the finance department looking up travel expenses. What are the, like at the local level, what are city council people spending? Is the city manager on the up and up? That kind of thing. And so I would uncover things, and I worked for a newspaper. It went on the front page. And so, public officials have to know there's an accounting. You're not just operating in secret, you know. And
She ended up
and
figuring out right behind the scenes that the guy was having auctions with public property. We called him Lawnmower Man.
he
And
was
then
selling, right, he was selling county property, or excuse me, not county, city property, such as used lawnmowers, and we never figured out where the money went. We're not saying the guy pocketed it. We're not saying that, but there was no paper trail, and it was kind of sketchy. It was sketch what this guy was doing. And he was the city manager.
maybe he was on
So
grass.
what's that? What'd you say?
Maybe maybe he was smoking grass.
Who knows? Southern California could have been anything going on, but I thought you were going to ask. So when I worked up in Northern California, if you guys know where Redding, California is, if we have anybody from Redding, California, say so in chat. And I was there. I worked for the Redding Record Searchlight newspaper. That's what it was at the time. And there was a lot of travel expenses going on, not just for the city council, but the city manager approved all that. And I was at the finance department every day for like 3 months digging this stuff up. I did a huge multi-series reporting on it. And within that time, the city manager was fired because of the stories and the information that I uncovered that the public had a right to know. So I got to expose him, and he was fired, and hopefully, things got better after that. But, I saw somebody in chat say, again, that's the job of journalists. If we aren't doing this, who is? How are we holding people accountable? And that saying absolute power corrupts absolutely. It really does. People with a little bit of power, not everybody, but they really can. If there's no guardrails for people, if there's no higher power and they think, they're God in a way in their life, they'll do all kinds of stuff. Corruption runs rampant. And so I always believe in transparency, putting sunshine on it, as you guys know. Wait, who said they were from Reading? Hang on, I missed that. From Reading area.
Wowzer.
Wait. All right. It's a beautiful area. I loved my time up in that area. It's just beautiful. Beautiful part of the country. Shasta County. Love the people. So good.
Yeah.
But so anyway, so here on YouTube, right, you guys? I mean, this case, the Idaho murders case, never went to trial. There's so much information that we haven't been told. I'm going to keep digging. I think you guys would want me to keep digging. I don't think that's a stretch. So I'll report back what I hear from the governor's office. We'll keep you guys posted on what comes out. And I'm hoping they give us a whole list and the receipts that show where the money went.
Yes. And the reason for that, on top of, just the need to know and the right to know under the law, and it doesn't matter really what state or country you live in, politicians work for the people. We don't work for them. And that goes for everybody. Public servants are called public servants for a reason. In law enforcement, on the side of the car, it says to protect and serve. Protect and serve. It doesn't say, get served. And so the fact that, unfortunately, Karen and I have the backgrounds that we have, we haven't fallen off a turnip truck. And the reason for that is I have said, Karen has said, you have said, our audience in chat, the most intelligent audience on YouTube, in my opinion.
The smartest true crime sleuthers ever, right
And,
here.
Yep. And there are many other true crime sleuthers out there who are also digging extremely well and putting videos up and of, transparency. Okay. Now, why is this important for all of us, though, to stay above the fray and make sure we're doing it correctly? Okay. So we don't run into another, well, this is the reason why, i.e. Morphew, we're not going to be allowing anybody but one camera into the courtroom problem. Okay. We want to make sure that we are delivering information correctly, accurately, and on target, because we don't want the system jeopardized by, craziness, for lack of a better term. Because this case, I have said it from the moment I heard Judge Hippler say to both the prosecution and the defense, we all heard it together. Well, and I'm going to paraphrase, we can go back and watch it, but what the judge said essentially is, well, we all know there really potentially could be an appeal. That's what he said. That's what his inference was. Even though Bryan Kohberger signed off, he got stuck in prison with his own head and own story about what he has done and what he had confessed to, which leads to this case is not over. Evident of the fact, we just had another hearing about, funeral urns for these victims. Now, why is that important? Because this is a situation that runs up against two rules. Okay. Rule number one is Brady versus Maryland. And rule number two is Giglio versus the United States, which was a 1972 case. Both of these rules apply heavily even as Bryan Kohberger sits in prison today. Ann Taylor and her defense team are crossing the T's even today to the point, okay, to the point where the judge says the other day, look, this is a contract. You guys entered a contract. And Thompson's response was, oops, Your Honor, I made a mistake. Okay. So we're going to talk about these two rules tonight because these rules can free a guilty man or jail an innocent one. Okay. Every homicide detective in the world, in the United States, should know about Brady and Giglio. There are other, Mapp versus Ohio. These are standard issue cases, okay, that every investigator should know about. Now, here's the problem that I see just watching some of the things going down here. Okay. The whole purpose for Brady versus Maryland is the rules basically say in 1963, the Supreme Court reshaped criminal justice by introducing what they call the Brady Rule. And in the Brady Rule, it basically says the case law, and the Supreme Court has upheld it. Look, suppression of evidence, okay, equals denial of due process, i.e., if the government doesn't do what they're supposed to do and they try to hide that stuff, okay, well, that impacts the defendant who has a constitutional right to sit before a jury on the very day that opening statements are made to that jury, that he is to be presumed innocent. There is a presumption of innocence before the trial even starts. Now, where did we just hear this? Okay. Karen, where did we just hear this?
We heard it in the Tyler Robinson case with the judge in Utah.
Yes.
He told everybody at that last hearing that Tyler Robinson was presumed innocent. The judge made that proclamation.
Right. So let's take a deep dive in what the Brady Rule really is. Okay. It basically says if the defendant, okay, it means that prosecutors must hand over every piece of exculpatory evidence. Anything that could help prove the defendant's innocence or lessen their responsibility. They have to give this to the defense. They have to give this to the defense. Okay? There's no getting around it. That's what the rules are. Brady versus Maryland, 1963. If prosecutors hide this evidence, it's a violation of the defendant's 14th Amendment or his or her right to due process. Now, what does this mean? It means the one thing that I've mentioned here in our program, one of the greatest compliments I ever received was from a very dear friend. His name is Mark Patine. I mentioned him the other night.
Tell everybody what he did or who he worked for.
He was the number 2 in the district attorney's office. So he was the number 2 person over all the DAs, everybody.
In what county?
In San Diego County. So over almost 3 million people. Okay. He's the number 2 guy. And Mark and I worked many cases together. And he said to me one day, and this was, to me, it still resonates with me. He said, McDonough, you know what makes you so dangerous? And I said, Mark, I have no way of understanding where you're going with that, buddy. And he says, you think like a defense attorney. He said, whenever we get one of your cases at the major case squad, there's no place for them to go because you have dumped all of the marbles, good and bad, onto the table. And the reason I did that and do that is because the Brady rule applies to evidence held by anyone connected to the case, the prosecution, the police, investigators, or any other state actor, including the case agent and anybody circling the wagons around the investigation. So that means all of the pluses and minuses have to be laid on the table. Okay. And the reason for that is so that the defense can say, well, Your Honor, I have that. Okay. But we're missing this. Okay. And so the second piece of this is the Brady rule. We have to ask, everything needs to be favorable to the defense. So you have to, as an investigator, present everything to them. When you make a mistake, when you don't make a mistake, because when you're on the stand and you're testifying and you get a defense attorney like, let's say, Billy Little or Barry Scheck or whoever, we'll just go down the list, and all of a sudden you're asked all these crazy questions and they take you down this lane like they did Fong, the criminalist in the OJ trial. We used to call that getting fonged. Okay. And you do not want to get fonged. Okay. So as some examples, you have to present all evidence that's favorable to the defense, i.e., are there other alternative suspects? And if so, why? Were there witness statements that were recanted and or changed? If so, why? Were they evolving in their conversations with the investigators, or were they following the information presented by the investigators that led them down a certain path? Okay. The consequences of any of that under Brady, okay, that could be grounds for an appellate ruling. And there have been many cases where appellate courts have turned it around and said, hey, wait a minute. Okay. This person needs another trial. Okay. If there's an example like, let's say, the state suppressed some information, that cops buried information, the DA sat on lab reports. Okay. And now one of the things that's interesting about the lab report, for an example, in that email we showed the other night, where, the sole point of contact became the district attorney. Okay. That is not standard in any high profile investigation.
Tell everybody why.
Because it potentially could violate the chain of custody and the best practices rules, and it risk Brady Gigolo disclosures because it breaches. If the prosecution breaches that, then he becomes a fact witness potentially, and it's not statutorily required. Meaning, there's no rule of evidence that says, Thompson, you're going to be the point of contact. We're going to call and you're going to tell us whether or not we're going to destroy this DNA. Now, why is that important? Because that's what they call administrative overreach. And this is why the other night, and why we're having this show tonight, I said, what? And now there's video of Jenkins, what's her face? Jennings.
Ashley Jennings was the second prosecutor working with Bill Thompson. She's a deputy DA.
Okay. She, along with many other law enforcement officials, and you're going to see this, those videos are starting to come out. Okay. And they're out there now. You can go look for them. Ashley goes into that crime scene before it's photographed, before it's videotaped, before any evidence is collected. Now, think about this for a moment. One of the things that drives me crazy is this idea that says, well, we've got everything under control. It's all good. Okay. And then you go back and you start looking at body cameras and you start discovering that the cops, the firefighters, which in this case, they're not the suspects, for lack of a better term, they're tromping up and down the stairwells and they're going through the house, okay, before a single photograph is taken, meaning there is no control. And then you have an inexperienced district attorney show up in a quadruple homicide in her flats, her shoes, with her hands in her jacket. And I watched the video last night. And she's taken upstairs with other detectives, including Payne, who looks like a deer, in the headlights, who has no idea what Brady / Gigolo actually means and how it would apply to him. And this is why when he was on the stand, he was like, huh? And what's scary about this is you also have Gilbertson, the guy who's now a lieutenant, is standing outside and letting these people all just walk by and go in. And he hasn't even sent in his team yet. They're setting up. Now, this is a problem.
And it also gets worse because now we know from the documents, they moved furniture in different rooms. They moved beds in order to take crime scene photos.
Yes.
We know that happened too. And there's notes within the documents that document it because somebody knew that's wrong.
Yes. And so the outcome of that, i.e. Brady violations, it impacts an investigation and it / a community, i.e. the families, the surviving victims, in one of two ways. It impacts them criminally from the improper management of the case. And then secondly, if he walks, then there have been civil violations or civil suits that have been filed where there have been extensive criminal liability outcomes. So what does this mean? It means that Brady is not optional. It is constitutional. And it doesn't matter if the DA knew police are part of it doesn't matter if the DA knew that the police were making mistakes. They are part of the prosecution's team. Okay? But they have to be two trains, which we talked about the other night. I want to reemphasize this. This is not an optional rule. This is a constitutional requirement for every law enforcement officer and every district attorney in the United States of America to follow these rules. And when you have the DA, both of them now, one of them saying, I'm the point of custody or the point of contact. Well, what is he doing? Because at least he's putting himself into the chain of custody, which is very risky. And now you have the second DA walking into the crime scene even before Thompson shows up, okay, to see what's going on, okay, to see the victims in the bedrooms slaughtered. Why? Give me one reason why before all of the evidence was collected. Because everybody that walked into that building without being covered up, if Santa Claus walked into that building, is it possible he's dropping hair out of his beard? Is it possible they're bringing stuff in from the outside, meaning they're tramping into that building as a whole? The answer is yes.
And the other thing that's so disturbing is if you just kind of pull back a little bit for the wider view, if the DAs went in and actually saw the horrific brutality that these poor college students suffered, and not just read a report, but actually see this up close, you would think that would give them fire in the belly to go after this killer with everything behind them, with the state behind them. They're in a death penalty state. You would think that would spark an inner light, an inner something to just go after them. And Steve Gonzalez told us, he said, they didn't do any of that, you know? So I'm just saying, if you're seeing the horror up close, how does that not spark your drive to no plea deal? We're taking this to trial, death penalty. We never saw that. There was like such a lackadaisical aspect to the prosecution. At least that's what it seems from the outside. You know, I mean, and just going back to your point, how would the district attorney, how would Bill Thompson, the prosecutor, be the point of contact? What's he going to do? Cross-examine himself during the trial? I mean, good grief, to your point. It's like he never should have been the point of contact. The person making the decisions about the lab, what gets tested, the decisions about the DNA. How was that going to play out in court if the prosecutor is the person making those decisions?
Yeah, great point. Because what happens here when these types of things happen is there's a famous case out of Texas. It's Michael Morton. This guy spent over 25 years in prison because the police had a bandana with the real killer's DNA on it. And so this guy got that $14 million verdict is what he did. And that goes to this idea then is Brady isn't a courtesy. Okay. It's the off switch for tunnel vision. That's what Brady versus Maryland does. Okay. Now, having spent 13 years in homicide and working hundreds of murders, this is ingrained in me. It was, we constantly had training about, because that's what we did. We investigated murders. When you have a guy coming to the crime scene that night who's never worked a homicide ever, okay, ever, and he's wearing a beanie and he looks like a deer, caught in the headlights, okay, he would not have known, nor did he take charge as the case agent of what's going on. What's happening simultaneously is you have all the administrators running around having meetings with the university, having, back at the corral, the chief wasn't even there. He drives in, and then that captain, Barrett, I think was his name, he runs over to the university, and they were so lost, they set up this communication center with the help of the university. Their first press conference was at the university. Okay. Now, I get it. They're overwhelmed. We get it. But that's why the FBI's there. In the Vallow case, they were overwhelmed too. And the FBI came up from Salt Lake and they sent their evidence recovery team to take care of it. But here you have on video now, and I'm here to tell you, you're going to see it because it's coming out, where you have Gilbertson sliding boxes of evidence material into the house before it was even photographed or videotaped. How does he know the suspect isn't moving around that entire house yet? They don't know that. They have cursory interviews going on. Okay. And why is that important? Because now that catapults us into what we call the Giglio rule. And Giglio versus United States 1972, which basically says credibility is evidence. If you hide it, it is a Brady violation. So that means everything has to come out. Everything. Which, if you look at this picture I got up there with the gavel going through the shield, the courts will intervene and say, look, this needs examination. And the court did on a lot of things that were presented to the court. But it never went to trial because you have now this movement by Thompson and then the district attorney's office coming to try, or coming, behind the scenes and working through this deal that says, look, they're reading all the reports as they're coming in as well. And so they're probably going, okay, well, let's look for violations of impeachment potential. Are the cops being honest? Police? Yeah, well, we want them to be honest. We want them to be. Are they being biased in any way, shape, or form? I.e., is somebody dating somebody in this circle somewhere, anywhere?
We're not saying that it is. Chris has an example of a case, a murder case that he worked, And one of the detectives that was assigned to the case was dating
The
the suspect's brother.
right.
Yeah. We're not saying that occurred in the Idaho 4 case.
Right. Yeah, I don't know where you got that, but yeah.
Well, it says it on the screen.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
no,
I
no.
just don't want people to think it's a fact of this case.
Yeah, no, we're not saying that. These are examples. Okay, this is what the court would have measured everything against. Okay, were there benefits given to somebody? Okay, meaning you tell us, and then we'll drop charges or whatever. And then number 4 is really interesting because are there inconsistencies in body camera that contradict reports? And the reason for that is Giglio basically says if one officer, just one, is not telling the truth, then reasonable doubt comes across the entire case. And that's what Giglio is. It's the credibility is evidence. If you hide it, it's a Brady violation. And the reason for that is juries want to make sure, okay? Juries want to make sure that law enforcement is being truthful and honest. That's what Giglio says. If a witness's truthfulness matters, then all of the dirt gets disclosed. And that's why Patine said to me, you're like, whenever you turn a case in, you dump all the marbles on the table. And the reason for that was because when defense would get my cases, they would lift the umbrella or lift the rock and go, oh, crap, there's marbles under here too. We thought we had something. Okay. And so police are not exempt from making mistakes. That's not what the law says. You can make mistakes. I've made a lot of mistakes, but I have to tell the court and the process, I made a mistake. Okay. If I don't do that, then that sets it off into another course. And I give an example here. In 2018, there was a death row case which was overturned because a detective had a prior drug planting scandal, and the DA knew about it and they buried it. That's the kind of stuff that we're going, hey, wait a minute. Does any of that exist in this case? And that's why I'm being so intense on behalf of the families, in my opinion, to really scrutinize what the heck is going on. Because in high-profile cases, jurors want to trust uniforms and investigators and DAs. But in this case, the public didn't get a chance to see that. Bryan Kohberger went to prison on a deal that the judge said, he could appeal somewhere, somehow. So the more this stuff drips out from ISP, Moscow Police Department, whoever, we keep going down, right? And Bob is correct. A good DA, a good prosecutor would get ahead of the mistakes on the onset, almost immediately. Okay. But when you have the DA themselves making the mistakes, we're in a different territory. When we have Jennings walking into the crime scene before the evidence teams to take a look, that's a problem in River City. That is a problem. And you can bet Ann Taylor saw it. And you can bet if she's arguing now about restitution as a death penalty attorney, high powered, they're not done. If you think they're done, I don't think they're done. Karen,
And
yeah.
part of what was sold to the families for this plea deal was that, well, we're going to spare you guys years and years of appeals and having to keep reliving this. And I would argue that in the last 4 months since this plea deal, it hasn't stopped. This is the case with no end. Chris, every single one of the murder cases you've worked had a beginning, a middle, and an end. Even the guys you put on death row. This particular case doesn't seem to have an end.
Yeah, exactly.
And that is grossly unfair for the victim families.
Right.
Disgusting.
And if we think about the destruction of the house, I made a note here a little while ago. Well, let's go back first of all to the gag order for a moment, as an example. A 2.5-year gag order. Okay. The duration and the scope of that exceeded any reported Idaho precedent, by the way. Okay. This is the first time Idaho has ever had a 2.5-year gag order.
I was really surprised that the lawyers didn't fight that. That wasn't fought in court.
Well, Ann Taylor wasn't going to fight it. Are you kidding me?
No, I'm talking about outside lawyers. They would have had to have been the media lawyers, because even the family's lawyers were gagged under that extensive, far-reaching gag order.
Right. And how
But they could have tried to fight it potentially.
how about the demolition of the house? Okay. It destroys what they call trombetta and young blood material evidence, meaning if defense later claimed an inability to investigate, the state would bear the bad faith burden, and demolition shifts the burden and invites a due process reversal and appeal.
It never made sense that a prosecutor would want and allow the crime scene to be demolished before the trial. They've never answered. Bill Thompson has never answered for that. I don't know if he's not getting pressed on it. I've never seen a national media interview with him where they asked him about that. It never made sense to me.
Yeah, and these are the things that, right now Thompson's going to go into the sunset. Okay. But an appellate attorney is going to pick up Bryan's case. And the more the stuff, comes out into the environment, they're going to ask a couple of questions. What's the lock? What opens up that lock? Okay. Well, any type of disclosure that they're going to see post conviction or post, I did it. Okay. They're going to ask, all the what if questions. Okay. Well, what if Jennings hadn't gone into that house? Okay. What if Thompson didn't put himself into the chain of custody? And all of these things, they just keep going on. Okay. So now you think about that, and what happens is, what if they would have had the car within, a short amount of time that they had it at the Washington State University? You see, because now all of this has shifted to the what if category in a possible appellate arguments. Now, what if he doesn't get an appeal? That's awesome. He goes away forever until you get like Robinson, for an example, where you have all of these crazy conspiracy theories hanging out there. And did you see recently Tyler Robinson made a statement? Yeah, I was there, but I wasn't the shooter. That came through his attorney. Okay. They are already what ifing things and buying into the court of public opinion. Okay. And we know what that's like, Karen, do we not? Yes,
We do. For that example, which is infuriating, let's put his parents up as the first two witnesses. His parents turned him in.
I get
So,
it. No, yeah. I get it. It's it's on camera, all this other stuff.
yeah.
But the defense doesn't care because they want the public to what if everything. They want Bryan Kohberger complaining about the bananas in his holding, from the kitchen, that they're not his type of bananas. They want all of this stuff because Brady is at the heart there in the middle. It's beating. Okay? Brady versus Maryland is beating because what the defense is going to look for is, well, wait a minute, did they bury any evidence? And if so, okay, that moves us into Giglio, i.e. witness credibility. Is there anything in the investigator's past that would help us see, okay, into the heart? So what Brady is the scalpel. And why is this important? Because right now there's been a plea deal, and which basically says he's done. Immunity, it's over. Have a great day. Bye-bye, Bryan. Okay. Well, if there are additional violations that leak out or come to the public's attention, well, that opens up the door again to Brady and Giglio. And that's what the judge was talking about. That lays the foundation for an appeal and additional FOIAs. And then that creates a very large explosion in the justice system. So in the Idaho murders, the plea avoided a trial, but it has not avoided scrutiny. And this is why it's important to give these kind of cases that are so high profile like this, plug it in the system and run. And this, I think, goes towards what Steve and Christy and all of these other, Xana's mom, right, Maddie's dad, Maddie's mom, right across the table. Olivia's impact statement, the Chapins, IGG fight that should be everywhere. It now shifts back to, well, if one officer had a file that wasn't released and the defense finds out about it, or if police sat on evidence, they could still move to withdraw the plea. It's not over, the bottom line is here. Brady and Giglio aren't paperwork. They are the guardrails of justice.
So in that kind of a situation, let's say FOIA's Freedom of Information Act requests, Public Records Act requests come out, and these agencies are releasing a lot more information. What would have to be found by BK's defense team in order to go with that scenario that you laid out as a hypothetical?
Well, what would have to be found is, was there any impeachable evidence or exculpatory evidence that would have gone in favor of Bryan Kohberger? And the prosecution knew about it and suppressed it.
So the
Meaning,
defense would have to prove that. They would have to prove that.
Well, yeah, they would have to show the court that, look, we've got, a Brady violation here, and they call it Brady violations because remember, Giglio builds on Brady, and it requires prosecutors and like the team we talked about to disclose any type of impeachment type of evidence. So if Payne had gotten up there during the prelim, and if there was something that they tucked away about him, and the defense finds out about it later, that's Giglio violation. Okay. And that means that they basically say, hey, this guy's got a credibility problem. What else is out there? Okay. What else is out there? And so when the Brady rules violated, it means the convictions, they can get overturned or new trials can be ordered on an appellate level. And let me give you a simple example. That if somebody is arrested for a crime and I want to be real careful. Well, I'll use Dave Mick. I'll give you an example. Remember it prevents tunnel vision. Okay? Until you have all of the evidence, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to pull the trigger right away. Okay. And yes, that is huge. I agree. That is very huge. So I had, as you know, remember Karen in the Jensen case, we had a guy who was driving a car, and I've explained this before, but I'm just going to give you the Reader's Digest version. They said this person did the crime. They threw everything on this guy. Well, I had a supervisor who said to me, arrest him. And the case was still moving. I was still interviewing witnesses. We were still doing a lot of stuff. And I told him, I said, no. I said, you can arrest him, but I'm not going to put bracelets on him, and I'm not going to be responsible for that. Fast forward. He did. He booked him over in the county jail, and within 2 weeks, I found the real murderer.
So you're saying your supervisor who ordered you to arrest the wrong guy for a murder went and arrested the wrong guy for the murder, and then they had to let him go.
Correct. Okay. Why is that important? Because that created a Brady problem. Okay. Once you put bracelets on somebody, it creates all of these issues. And this is why that gap period where you go, hey, we got a white car over here. We need to flush this car out and this driver. If you have one DA in the background, if they discover that Thompson was making the calls, that they knew who Bryan Kohberger was, but Thompson didn't want him hooked up yet and was telling the investigation, don't hook him up yet. Okay. That created all kinds of issues for not only evidence collection potentially, okay, but it also gave him an escape mechanism potentially. It also jeopardized other officers who stopped him potentially, unaware that this was a quadruple homicide suspect. And so the what ifs become significant. Okay. Well, if any of that, if something would have happened, i.e., another citizen would have been killed, murdered, or anything like that in between all of this, and they knew, okay, that's what these two rules prevent, that tunnel vision.
So let me say that as so many of you watching know, that's another aspect of this case that we have stayed on and been dogged in our coverage on, of when did the investigators know about the killer's car, that white Elantra, and why did they not ever go contact him when they saw it parked November 28th outside his apartment at Pullman, Washington? The logical question is, okay, so if you knew this, and now we have documentation that on December 5th, like a week after, they saw his car and they had his name, they had his car, they had his location. He's appears on the suspect list, the official suspect list. But our question always was, why didn't the Washington State University officer who found the car, who connected the white Elantra on WSU's campus with one Bryan Kohberger, why did they never make contact? And we have been pursuing that angle for months. Obviously, we've been stonewalled. We have put in FOIA requests. We've put in Public Records Act requests for that information. We were initially told it doesn't exist. There's no written documentation about the Washington State University officer who went and made contact, or excuse me, who went and verified the white Elantra on November 28th. Well, that doesn't make sense, because of course there would be a CAD. Of course there would be body cam video of that officer driving up, getting out of his vehicle, and probably walking over to the white Elantra. So to Chris's point, that one aspect of this case we think is huge. We're going to stay on them. It's probably going to be a long fight to try to get that documentation, but we want to know what happened the night of November 28th when Washington State University police made the connection. We think that was the first time. It's possible they knew earlier, between the killer, the white Elantra, and the apartment that this car was parked. We will stay on it, because until somebody answers for it, the public has a right to know. And that is huge, because it's so key in the case, because he would have never been able to, well, number one, they probably would have been able to gather a lot more evidence from his car. He would have never been allowed to leave. There would have never been a cross-country trip back home. There would have never been trash pulls by the FBI outside of his parents' Pennsylvania house. I've asked this question from day one. Why wasn't he buckle swabbed November 28th? They buckle swabbed other suspects. We know we've got reports that show that. So anyway, to your point, Chris, we're going to stay on that until we get an answer.
Yeah, I mean, this is, it's important. It's important for that transparency for the families, because there's nobody wants to wake up one day and we read that an Idaho appellate court has overturned Bryan Kohberger's conviction and sent it back to the lower courts.
Yes, we never want to hear that.
And so again, this is why the scrutiny of this is crucial, because there potentially could be three consequences. Obviously, the conviction could be reversed, even years later. Always remember that. He's in prison forever. Okay. But his conviction could be reversed on an appellate motion if they get into the courts. We don't know. I mean, I've got murderers that I put away for life that are walking the street today, and I'm still here. Meaning I'm retired from those people that I put in prison, but they're out on the street today, because you don't know what the courts are going to do. They are constantly changing. Okay. So the worst case consequence is there could be a reversal. On the DA side, they could, face bar disciplinary problems. They could have their, they could be punished through the bar. And then, of course, on the third side is there could be civil lawsuits taking place from the families against everybody and, who put their shoulder to the wheel on this thing. So those are the three real major levels that could go on here. Okay. And the university could be exposed extensively if they were the ones driving the conversations behind the scenes. Because at that point, you get in there with a really good civil attorney, and that firm starts dropping subpoenas on everything, emails, et cetera. The list goes on. Okay. Now you got a problem.
That may be the only way these emails are ever going to come to light. It would have to be depoted, and it would have to go through a civil procedure. We're not leaving it to the authorities to do the right thing and release everything. They ain't doing it.
Yeah, right now.
Yeah, heck no, they're not doing it.
And so we'll see what's going to happen. And, because we right now are concerned about these people. And trust me, this has hurt me professionally to critique these individuals, not the families. But when you have this idea that says, hey, you know what? Yeah, I'm just going to trample through this quadruple homicide. Well, who are you? Oh, I'm the DA. What? Well, I'm sorry. This is my scene. You're not coming in. Once we get it processed, i.e., we collect all the evidence, I'll let you in. And then you can take your look-see. Okay. But, I mean, I've had Karen knows me. I'd had chiefs come up to me, captains, lieutenants. Hey, I'm coming in. No, you're not. What do you mean? We're not done. Well, I don't care. I want to go see that. No, this isn't a sightseeing tour. Okay, there are dead people in there, and you're not coming in. When Brandon Wilson killed Matthew Checky, one guy went into that bathroom, and you're talking to him. And when I came out, and my supervisor said, "What do we have?" And I said, "Nothing." We had a transfer of blood, this victim's blood, on the side wall of that bathroom. And on the floor was a deceased 9-year-old little boy with his throat cut and arterial bleeding over the urinals. So he bled him out. Do you think I was going to compromise that 9-year-old boy for my own pride? The answer is no. Brandon Wilson, who we caught, it went to death row. Because that's where he belonged. Okay. And in my opinion, anybody that, doesn't like the fact that I'm critiquing, I don't care.
Actually, some people in chat don't think we're going far enough with our critique and criticism.
Well, I get it. But at the same time, I'm talking about even my brothers and sisters in blue. Because we're better than that. We're better than that. Now, the patrol guys did a great job. And the lab people, fantastic. A lot of great things happening there. Okay. It's when all of the chefs start coming into the kitchen and start throwing eggs in the pan. Okay. When you're cooking fried rice. That's when it gets messy. And in this case, that's when it got messy.
And from the outside, you would think that once they're in there, again, I just can't get past this, that if you've seen the brutality up close, not just heard about it, read it in a report, you walk in there, you see the blood, you see these college-age kids. You know, Ashley might not, but Bill Thompson has kids of his own. How are you, as the prosecutors in that county, not fired up to go find, the son of a gun who did this? Because they weren't, because his actions speak louder than words. Because you would have said, no, I'm not going to do a gag order. We need transparency. Forget it. I'm going to fight the defense. No, we're not doing that. Oh, you want to tear down my crime scene? No, not happening. We're keeping that up until the trial. And
Yes.
on and on. Ann Taylor, no, I'm going to fight the defense, trying to move this case. Now, in hindsight, obviously it was a good thing it was moved, because Judge didn't want any part of it. Latah County washed their hands of this case. But we never saw the fire in the belly. We never saw this, just wanting to do what's right for the victims' families and the community at the same time. That the state represents the families. And it's we all sat and watched all of this unfold for 3 years now. We're coming up, this week is the 3rd year anniversary. And all of us are in agreement that, or most of us, that what we saw in this prosecutor is not the norm, went against what you just laid out tonight, was against best practices of what you do and what you don't do for crime scene. And I think at the end of the day, the part that really galls me, and it's a lot of people, is that the plea deal was sold to the families, who half of them were not even on board with it, as a really fast hurry up. Why were they in such a hurry to do this plea deal? Nobody has answered for that. And the families were not consulted. We know that. And the families were sold a bill of goods. It was BS that do the plea deal and it's done. He's going to prison and you'll never hear from him again. That'll end the case. Well, obviously not. If we're back in court this last week, fighting over restitution, fighting over the money paid for the urns for Maddie and Kaylee, my stomach turned. I felt so sick for the families, for the $1,300 or $1,500 or whatever it was. And then to hear Bill Thompson say, well, I made another mistake. I made a mistake. Well, I thought the family, which is the whole reason for the whole hearing to begin with. Hey, families, yeah, you can get reimbursed for the travel cost of going down to Ada County for, the plea deal, the sentencing, etc. And then he's like, oh, I made a mistake. He acted like he's never done a plea deal in his life. So it's been beyond frustrating. And I can't even imagine what the families, we know what the families feel, the ones who were speaking, they're very outspoken about it. They have every right to, but again, if I have to sum this up, it doesn't feel like justice was fully served in this case.
Great summary, Karen. And to answer some of the quick questions, because of the phone calls, when that was sent, when those calls were made, and the other students running up and down, and even before the cops got there and moving and all this other stuff. Yeah, great points. However, those are controllable, meaning once you get there and they're there, i.e. all of those people, well, then you do everything possible. You fingerprint them, you take their clothing, you take their shoes, you get pictures of their shoes, you do DNA buckle swabs, you just go down the list. Every person that was in that house before the cops got there, Okay. You take all of that evidence and put it into evidence. I mean, we used to take paper suits and give people paper suits. You know, why are you doing that? Well, I noticed you have blood on your shirt. I just have to make sure it's either the victim's blood or, you know, where it came from. Oh, I didn't see that. That must have happened while I was doing CPR. Not a problem. We'll get you a shirt. Not a problem. And you do that. That's what you do. Okay. So all of that noise about all the kids, what they were doing before, I don't get strung out on that stuff because there's a way of controlling it. Because once you do that, now what's interesting is they had so much more evidence that they never processed. Because it became a money situation. You can clearly see it in the reports where you see the lab sends, you know, $500 and there's columns of information about what they did. But then when they get to this other stuff, right, other things, oh, well, we got a match on Bryan Kohberger. And as soon as they got a hit on him, it was over. They stopped it.
You know, Chris, to your point, that didn't make any sense why they included that in the recent document dump. These pages, when we had it up in our video, when we did it on that, $500, $500, and it said like $2,000 maximum. If you're gonna run the numbers, show us all the frickin' numbers. Okay, don't just show us 2 pages of, you know, $2,000 worth of DNA, because there were thousands of pages of DNA, you know, numbers, charts, and that kind of thing. That was mindless. That made no sense. Show us the receipts. How much did the whole case cost? Let's go there. Okay? It didn't make any sense, and more people need to be calling them on this stuff.
Yeah, and I think we're in a new age here, and with platforms like ourselves and others that are FOIA and getting information and putting it up and doing streams about it, and there's no way of getting around it. That is real evidence that a jury would have seen. And if a jury would have seen it and the DA would have played it, okay, the jury would have may have asked, well, why is the DA walking in there when they haven't even started to process the scene? And they write a little note and they send it into the court, and the court gets the note and says, counselors, come up to the bar here, to the bench, and they do a little side hustle. And the judge leans over and says, I have a note here from the jury. They noticed the prosecutor, Jennings, was into the crime scene before it was processed. What do you want to do? And the defense is going to say, yeah, what do you want to do? Your Honor, we're not going to say a word until we hear what the state wants to do. And you just keep compounding that stuff. You get like pain. Well, everybody's putting booties on, going into the crime scene. He decides he doesn't need a pair. So you see him walking up the steps without booties, but everybody else has booties. And remember in the OJ case, Barry Scheck said to Mr. Fong, he said, how many pair of gloves did you use? One. Huh. And so you didn't change your gloves at any time? Well, yeah, sometimes I would. And then remember the famous, boom, he puts a picture up and he turns to him and goes, what about that, Mr. Fong? Okay, that's called getting fonged. Mr. Payne was lucky that he didn't get fonged. Trust me, it is no fun as a homicide detective sitting on that stand with a very skilled defense attorney.
Chris, sometimes you were on the stand for days, not hours, but days at a time, getting grilled by defense attorneys
Yeah,
for some of your cases.
I'll show a commendation. Remind me, Karen, I'll pull that one commendation up I have. I was on the stand for almost 3 days with 6 defense attorneys because there was a 3 defendant case and they did not separate the juries. All the defendants wanted to be tried together. So we had 45 jurors. We had 12 jurors and 3 alternates for all 3 juries. 45 jurors in a courtroom. And I have the commendation of where the district attorney lays it all out, how many days I was on the stand and the testimony that I gave. And I didn't get fonged one time. Do you know why? Because I dumped my marbles before it ever happened. And it was crazy. It was brutal. But we got a conviction because they actually did it. And it's that same case what I told you about with Dave Mick. It was Rebecca Jensen was the victim. So it was crazy. And, you know, that's why you got to do it. You got to remember Brady and you've got to remember Giglio. If you don't know those 2 cases, and every patrol officer should know Map versus Ohio, okay? I mean, and a Terry, pat down, a Terry pat down search. You got to know these things. That's about as far as you really, need to go. The rules and all this other stuff. The attorneys will figure that out. But you've got to know what the rules are as an investigator. If you don't know the rules, get out of the business. Seriously. Because citizens deserve respect and service, and they expect professionalism from investigators. That's what they expect. They do expect that level of professionalism. And if you can't pull it off, well, then, you know what? Maybe you should be, doing something else as a whole.
Well, to your point, the lead investigator, Brett Payne, left Moscow PD and now works for the University of Idaho.
Well,
and we're told in a non-law enforcement capacity.
Well, maybe you should go to 31 Flavors. Because what I've seen already on the body cam video told me everything I already suspected. And how many times have I talked about it on this program? No disrespect to him as a man, okay? But as a law enforcement officer who's never investigated a murder, you don't pretend. And shame on that department for putting him into that position. It was wrong to put him in that position. And I hold them accountable as well. Now, did they get the guy? That's what people are going to say. Well, they got the guy. No, they didn't. Bryan Kohberger caught himself by leaving that sheath behind. You know who caught the guy? The lab technician. All the street cops did and the detectives is put a set of bracelets on him back in Pennsylvania. It was the lab technician with that swab on the snap. Bryan Kohberger caught himself.
And to think if they had knocked on his door November 28th, right? How many days? 2 weeks after the murders, and got a buccal swab then, they would have had a match.
Yeah. And much love to all the investigators. I agree with you. I'm not saying all of them. You haven't heard me say that. Okay. But we also have to be honest enough to step back and say, okay, let's critique what we could have done better.
And here's another area which we really haven't spent much time talking about. Once the killer was arrested in Pennsylvania and then brought into the Pennsylvania State Troopers barracks, where Brett Payne and Sergeant Gilbertson from Idaho State Police interviewed him, what'd they get?
They got dogs and football.
That's about it.
And here's something even crazier. When we watch these videos of the body camera of the guy right there at the door with the log, okay, you know what they're passing? They're passing by every one of the victims' cars. Okay. You know the first thing you do? First of all, you don't stand there at the door. You stand out there by the trailer with a crime scene log because there's tape out there. And everybody circles up outside and you say, okay, what's your name? I'm so-and-so, such and so at ISP. Okay, great. What are you going to do? I'm going to take photos. Okay, come on in. How about you? I'm doing video. Awesome. Okay, come on in. Now, once you get that piece of the puzzle, outside's been processed. You know the next thing you do? You pick up the phone, the radio, and you say, I need 1, 2, 3, 4. I need 5 tow trucks. Okay. Click, 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 click. Front plates all around, what they call, circle the car. Don't touch it. Nobody touches it. Load it up. Get them out of here. Now, the front yard is clear. Okay. And now you can look down and go, oh, hey, that's a glove. Holy crap. How the heck does this thing get here? What the heck's going on here? Now, once that's all processed, now you move in. Now you go into the front door. And that may take 3 hours to do that. Okay. Instead, they went in, everybody walked around, came back down outside, went to the trailer, came back, went back in, came back outside, went to the trailer. 3 guys go in or 2 guys go in. There's a total of 4 at that point that are in there taking photographs, videotapes inside. Okay. Then they come out and they go, okay. And on the body camera, you hear one of the guys say, hey, we're videotaping. So if you guys want to, duck or hide or back in the background. Okay. And we're going to get that video. And it's going to be really interesting. So that said, did I miss anything, Karen?
I don't think so.
I love you. This girl is amazing. All right, everybody. Well, we love you guys. Thank you always for being with us. Please hit the like and subscribe button. Follow us over on Facebook too if you haven't seen that over there. We really appreciate it. And if you wouldn't mind sharing this out with all of your friends and family, we would be grateful for that. So that said, continue to take care of each other. Aloha. See you on the next one.
Bye, everybody.
Hard working every day. I'm stressed out 24/7, babe. No timeouts. Wish we could fly away. You and I go to our favorite place. Oh yeah, yeah. Make special memories. we're taking away. Yeah, we're taking away. Don't hesitate now. We're taking away. Yeah, we're taking away. We'll never come down. We're going away. Yeah, we're going away. You and me. Feeling the sun on my face in a while.